Welcome, I'm Sam Faddis. This is Ground Truth, and we're going to be talking today about China and the horrific, almost surreal experience of a United States citizen locked up in China and really powerless to defend himself against the machinery in the Chinese Communist Party. And with us to talk about that, the individual who went through all of this, Warren Rothman, who is, spent a lot of years in China and a real expert on China, but we'll jump into some of that in a moment. Warren, welcome.
Thank you, Sam.
So look, let's just set the stage here because I always try when I'm doing one of these things to make sure that people that are tuning in kind of understand context. You know, they're not lost. We're going to delve into here a story regarding you and this horrific experience that you went through in China. But let's address this first. Why were you in China? What's the background to that? How does that happen?
I was a lawyer. Did my legal studies at Yale, and after graduation, I went to a Wall Street law firm where I did securities law, and then eventually, the fact I had studied Chinese and Chinese language and Chinese, even some Chinese law when I was at Yale, and I was recruited in 1980 to go to China by a Fortune 500 company. I went there. I got a good idea of what China was like. And then by the 1990s, I was devoting my professional life full-time to China, first as a management consultant for major U.S. technology and telecom companies, and then as a lawyer based in Beijing and living in Beijing starting in the year 2000.
So by the time we get to what we're going to be talking about here, the incident, I mean, you had been in China for many years, and you really, I mean, in other words, where I'm going with this is you weren't somebody that just jumped off a plane here and had been in China for a few days. By the time you get into what happened to you, you understood this country, had lived there, spoke the language. I guess what I'm saying is you were kind of, I think you felt at that point on familiar ground. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. I actually felt quite at home in China by the year 2008, when all of my story begins to unfold. It was a great shock to me what happened because I felt as though I had established a certain simple, modest way of life there that was quite law-abiding and also very, very pleasant.
Right. So the book that I was remiss in not mentioning when we kicked off here that you've written about this whole thing, and we'll come back to talking about this again at the end, is called Kafka in China. And I think that's a brilliant title, as you and I have discussed off air, because, you know, Kafka has, having read a lot of Kafka, it's just that the bizarre nature of his writings and the sort of, you know, the experiences that are described where it's just kind of, this doesn't make any sense. What the heck is happening? I don't, and that I think is what happens to you, right? You're in China, you're on familiar ground. You think that you're comfortable there. You are comfortable there. And then you very inadvertently come into possession of information that triggers a whole series of events. So what is that information and how does that happen?
Okay, in May 2008, I was having dinner in a basic, simple restaurant in Shanghai with a Chinese paralegal at a Western law firm. We'll call him Q. Q and I were acquaintances. We knew each other. I had hired him for some moonlighting maybe a year or two before that when I was working independently on my own in Shanghai, and I felt his legal work was quite good, and so I kept up a very occasional relationship with him. Well, suddenly we haven't even finished the first course, and Q blurts out to me that he has arranged a $3 million bribe given to high-level officials in an extremely sensitive governmental department of China in order to obtain approval for a very difficult to approve deal for an American client of his law firm with whom he was working. In all the years I was in China, maybe I was deeply naive, but I truly never thought that I had any reason to think that anything I was working on was corrupt. A lot of these deals just came and went and collapsed. Some were negotiated forever. If they were actually ever went through, that was usually the case. But I never thought that anyone was passing money improperly or illegally. And to have someone who's working at a Western law firm, a Chinese man who I respected, who I thought really understood what we mean by rule of law and what he needed to understand to work in that law firm, was completely betrayed. I was outraged. So I berated him. I really let him have it. And that exchange is what led to the entire rest of our story.
Right. So let's grab a hold of this for 1 second, because what you just said right now is, I think, the key piece at this stage for people to understand, because this really is the key. The bribe. What are we talking about? I don't want to be sound like I'm naive, or focusing on the obvious, but he's talking about a bribe that's paid in the millions of dollars. For what purpose?
In order to get approval to get official stamps on the deal that he was helping negotiate for his American client.
So we got Americans paying off Chinese officials to get what they want.
Yeah, that's very important that you said it in that order, Sam, because when you're talking about corruption in China, it takes two to be corrupt. And as many Chinese accept bribes, Americans and other Westerners give them.
Okay, and this has nothing to do with you. I mean, you're not involved in this. However, Q, we'll just keep using a designation, has now, for whatever reason, just divulged this information. He's brought you in on this secret, and your reaction.
He's bragging.
Right. Okay. All right. So he's bragging about this. He thinks, I guess, he's going to be a big man in your eyes. And the reaction he gets from you is not what Q expected, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know why he thought I would be impressed, but I definitely was not, except in the worst possible way.
All right, so this guy now, and again, the reason I'm hammering on this is just to make sure that listeners are following here, because again, as you just noted, this is kind of the hinge on which everything turns. He goes from bragging to you and divulging information about criminal activity to realizing, whoa, that was a bad decision because this guy didn't like that, didn't react to it, is now berating me. I should not have told him this. Is that an accurate description of where we are?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And so from this point on, I'm laughing not because it's funny, but because it's just so bizarre. I mean, from this point...
There's some honestly funny, in a bizarre way, moments.
Yeah, well,
story.
In my life, I've had those kind of moments where sometimes, maybe in the aftermath, they're funny. They're not necessarily real funny at the time. But so, you're there, you've been doing business, you're doing fine in China, you're really on settled ground. All of a sudden, you've got this issue that you didn't ask for. And this triggers a whole series of events that end up really with a horrifying consequence. Because, so what's the next? I mean, after this, what's the first thing that happens to you that starts telling you that, oh my God, like things are going wrong in my life? What happens next?
Can I just make one quick point, Sam?
Yes.
I really was annoyed and angry with Q for what he said he had done. But on the other hand, it was something that I never really thought much about at that time, because I realized, yeah, you do hear about a lot of bribes, and here's one. And the second thing is there's absolutely nothing as an American lawyer dealing with American law and American regulators that I could possibly have done with that information. On the other hand, because there was no evidence that I could have presented to anyone I might have wanted to tell about it. There was
Sure.
nothing that anyone
Sure.
started an investigation.
Sure, you're going to be
on
left
in the
going
United
and
States.
telling somebody, "Hey, I heard from a guy about this," and that's
Yeah,
useless.
just
That's
hearsay.
useless. That's useless information.
Yeah, in the U.S. But in China, the other side of it, that's a deeply, deeply threatening piece of information to put in anyone else's hand. I'll leave it there.
Right. So then things begin to happen to you, and I get you just made, and I think it's important. I'll point out. You tell me if I'm wrong. Things begin to happen to you, but like so many things in life, nobody gives you a preamble and says, "Hey, by the way, the following things are going to happen," and they're all connected to this, and briefs you and gives you a heads up. It's just events begin to occur, and as they're happening, you're left trying to figure out basically what the heck is going on here, right? So what's things begin to happen to you? What's the first thing of consequence that happens?
Well, the first thing that's kind of odd, I was away from China between early May and October 5th, 2008. I had things to do in San Francisco, and I also wanted to be away from China during the clamor and commotion of the Beijing Olympics, which of course flowed into Shanghai as well. So I was away until October 5th. Meanwhile, the background is the financial markets have completely crashed, and the financial and business world are in chaos and basically in gridlock. No one has any money. Credit systems are frozen. Banks seem helpless and somewhat bankrupt in some cases. So that's the thing that has suddenly exploded over the summer. And I find myself in Shanghai just because I felt, well, I might as well go back. I haven't been there for 4 months. Might as well check out my apartment, see if any of my friends are around, just, be there because I always was used to being there. But there's really no business to be done. Anyway, I find myself completely sleepless. And I have a long, long history of insomnia. So at first, the sleeplessness wasn't surprising to me. But over a period of 2 weeks and 2 days, I may have slept a total of 3 or 4 hours. Now, the other thing about that was I actually felt quite good during that period, despite everything that was going on. Despite a kind of underlying sense of exhaustion, I really had a certain amount of energy. And so, although I didn't have any friends around that I could locate, I went around walking in my usual neighborhood, the old district down below, very colorful style buildings, lots of very nice people, photographed with babies in their stalls. So that was great. I knew a lot of them, nodded at them, and they nodded at me. So, I had a nice time. I was feeling quite relaxed despite everything that was going on in the financial markets, even a little upbeat. At any rate, on October 21st, after a long walk in a park with the husband of my housekeeper, we'll call her I.E., A-Y-I. I come back to my apartment mid-morning, and the whole place is completely trashed upside down. Papers, CD discs, books, records, files, newspapers, thrown everywhere in every single room with ashes thrown on top of everything. The place was a complete mess. It looked like a rubble field, a field of rubble. So I quite terrified coming upon this scene and tried to make some sense of it. I couldn't. An hour or so later, the IE comes back and I catch her furtively sneaking around, trying to look and see where I am and trying to see what my reaction, I suppose, is to all of this, because she didn't look at all surprised at what she saw. Her face looked, oh, this is the way I left it, kind of thing. So she refused to tell me anything about why the apartment looked that way. She tries to make a run for it. She still has my keys in her hand, and I rip those out of her hand, and she races down 10 flights of stairs and escapes. So there I am. This woman, her husband, her son, they had already been kind of like almost like a family. They really became very close. They would tell me all their problems. I would help them. I would tell them personal things about myself. And I gave them a great deal of money, actually, over the time that I knew them. Over the year and a half I knew them. If the son had some problem and needed money for a remedial course, I gave it to them. If the IE lost some money, 10,000 yuan or $1,500, $1,200 of the person that she was also working for collecting rent, I helped her that. Gave her 10,000 so she wouldn't be embarrassed. Her husband had a horrific accident. I gave them money for that. So these were people I had every reason to think I could trust and who were always really very nice to me the whole time. I knew them until this moment. So I really had no idea why this was happening. I had no idea what had motivated her to suddenly do something like this. I really had not a clue. So
So let me pause you for just 1 second, because again, just in context, you have this conversation with Q. You become privy to this information. You're out of country for most of the next several months. You return to China, and very shortly after you come back in China, if I'm understanding you correctly, basically your apartment is tossed, and and you're saying that you think that this maid, this housekeeper, whatever we're going to call her, that she's implicated in this by the way she behaves. I mean, I think you said in your book, she doesn't seem to really, when she shows up, she seems to be looking for your reaction, but there's no sort of, oh my God, what happened, as if she's surprised and doesn't expect this. Is that accurate?
Exactly.
And something else I'll throw in as an aside here, from a guy who's spent a lot of time doing clandestine operations, not intimidating people and not working as part of a secret service, but having gone into search a terrorist suspect's apartment when we don't want him to know we're there. There's a distinction between surreptitiously searching somebody's apartment, in which case the premium is on leaving and leaving no indication that you were in the apartment, and a completely separate thing, which is to go in and destroy somebody's thing. In other words, not care at a minimum whether they know you're there, because that bespeaks intimidation. That bespeaks I don't care that you know I was here. I can come back anytime, and that kind of psychological element to this, which I'm sure is how you must have felt at this time, which is, okay, now I got no control over this. Somebody's in here trashing my stuff, and I don't even know what's going on.
That's exactly how I felt, and I felt, though, as you earlier stated, that by the way she behaved, that it was very clear that she had done it or been party to it.
Right. At a minimum, she had given whoever did this access.
Yeah, she didn't have. She was the only person who had keys to the place.
Okay, so after this first incident, and I know, I encourage people, you got to read this book, Kafka in China, and we're not going to be able to do the story complete justice here in the amount of time that we've got, but a whole series of then additional events begin to take place, right? I mean, there's a point here at which sort of thugs rough you up.
Yeah, you could say that without wanting to, just tell the story all in advance. As an overall matter, this was a plot that evolved over time, and when it didn't achieve its objectives, it went to another phase.
Okay, I think that's a brilliant way to characterize it. So you have, I think you're roughed up on the street. Am I getting that? Do I remember that correctly? And then there are also, or there are thugs that appear at your apartment.
It was the latter. The night of the apartment trashing, and let's say that first of all, I tried to call the U.S. consulate, get no help there whatsoever. Then I spend an evening wondering what's going to happen, and around midnight, about 10 thugs show up at my door, pounding, stomping, yelling, gesticulating. They don't rush me up. In fact, they don't even touch me. But in fact, I'm quite belligerent with them. And I'm not the sort of person ever to get into a fist fight with people at all. But I belly up to these guys and I say, get out of here. What the hell are you doing? You must be wrong. What the hell are you, get out. What are you bothering for? So they tromp down the stairs. And, after I race back inside and catch my breath and I'm still much more terrorized, of course, than even before. But of course, I know that the two events are not coincidental to each other. There had to be a connection, being so close in time. But what the connection was, and certainly why it was happening, was absolutely beyond my knowing or imagining at the moment. So I spent another day terrified. To make a long story short, I've already done something somewhat foolish. I have a book called The Tiananmen Papers in my apartment, which could not be a more dangerous book to have because it gives the exact story with documents of what happened when the leadership massacred the students and protesters in Tiananmen Square all over China. There were Tiananmen Squares all over many, many cities. So there was a horrific massacre, and this book that I had acquired in a Hong Kong airport and just casually stuck in my luggage was there. And I was really terrified at seeing that sticking out among the rubble because I thought if the police ever happened to be calling, I could really get in terrible trouble for having that book. A Chinese person might be sent to a labor camp for an indefinite period of time or terribly treated. So at any rate, I tear up the book as best I can. I mix it up with all kinds of other miscellaneous papers, throw them off my balcony, spend the rest of the day wondering what the hell did I do that for? God, if the Chinese picked it up through the word Tiananmen Square, I'm going to really be in trouble. So, but nothing ever happened that I knew of that book. But that was on my mind too. So that night, another group of thugs, including many of the ones I had spotted the previous night, show up again around midnight. This time there are 3 to 4 more of them, and the same procedure. They're dressed in unmarked uniforms, marked uniforms, policemen, firemen, people with firemen's hats, people with no uniform, just, gold chains, smoking crazy and like crazy. So again, I open the door and say, look, what's going on here? I try to be a little more reasonable this time. And they just start gesticulating and so forth. And I notice that there are three black hats sitting on the heads of 3 of these people, and they're all the same. And they have these gold eagle insignia. Well, I thought, what's that? So in a rather rash gesture, I popped out and grabbed 1, 2 of the hats right off their heads, slammed the door in their faces, banging worse than ever. But the door held, and eventually they leave. My hands are just shaking looking at these hats because I said, what is this? This must be some type of mafia, a really organized mafia, which was actually later confirmed to me to be the case. So I should say that during these 2 days, outside of all of the action with the thugs, Q is showing up uninvited, bringing food, raining outside. Oh, Warren, you get sick, I'll bring you some food. Gee, you must be upset about what's all happening here. And so he's like, serving sort of the purpose of the eye by providing food. But meanwhile, he's there several times each day. I feel like kicking him out. But anyway, there he was.
Okay, and Q is not. I mean, so while we've got all this crazy pressure that all of a sudden is being brought to bear on you, this guy is all of a sudden shown up and acting like he's your best buddy. My characterization, but in fact, that was not your prior relationship with this guy. This guy, you were not bosom buddies. They were casual acquaintances before this.
That's right. That's right. Somewhat work, related. I had him work for a big assignment for me that I had to help me with, but that was a one-off deal and a couple of very, very small little research jobs I would give him now and then. But, he had a real full-time job. He didn't depend on me for his income in any way. So the next day, Q shows up. I start to try to contact some of my friends, Chinese friends. None of the ones in Shanghai or anywhere that I could find. I finally found a couple who were in Beijing. one of my oldest and best friends. Let's call him Lin. I called Lin up. He says he's ready to come to Shanghai to help me. Suddenly, Q comes in the door again. And I said, what the hell is this? And he starts talking to my friend Lin on the phone. And in a dialect I just didn't understand, or I was just too far away to really hear it. So he took the phone out to the deck. He comes back with the phone and says, oh, here's Lin. And Lin says to me, oh, it looks like your friend Q has everything under control. I'll come to Shanghai if you really need me. But, let's see what happens if your friend Q can help you. So Q says to me, oh, you really ought to go to a doctor to see someone about your insomnia. Well, I haven't been out of the house for days, and I really want to get out. And I haven't seen a doctor specifically for that for years. Maybe my current medicine just isn't really working. Maybe there's something better. So I agreed to go with him. He said, it's a Western doctor. We go to a shopping center, and a doctor greets us right on the ground floor. You would think we were going to Nordstrom. That's a special, high-level sale type thing. At any rate, ushers us up to a lounge. We talk. I tell him a little bit about what happened. Q has already told him a great deal about what has happened from what he wanted to tell. That's, 10, 15-minute discussion. Then I'm ushered into another doctor, a Western, an American, who talks to me for maybe 5, 7, 10 minutes total, and somewhere in the middle of there tells me, oh, I think you might need a rest. And I said, well, what kind of a rest? He said, well, a place where you can just, be away from all of these, troubles he's telling me you're going through. I said, well, no, I need to figure it all out. And I could use a rest. I could use some sleep, but that's not going to help me. So what kind of a place is this anyway? He said, well, it's a nice place. I said, well, can you leave there whenever you want? Well, no. So I said, well, thanks a lot. And I started leaving the office. And I say, see you later. And hope to ditch Q and get back to my apartment. Q sticks to me like glue. And we're in a cab together and waiting for a cab in the rain. He's got the only umbrella. We go to my apartment. He's upstairs. And suddenly he leaves. And, sometime after, I can't exactly say when, a half hour maybe, he comes back with 4 thugs. And he starts ordering the thugs to pack all my stuff up because I'd already set up 2 escape bags right near the door. He said, I'll close them up and throw in whatever's in, and it's all in Chinese, and just leave a silent caption. He says to me, we got to get out of here. What do you mean, got to get out of here? You're in danger. I said, what kind of danger? I can't tell you. It's just too dangerous. It's too horrific. You got to get out of here. You're really in danger here. I said, no, I'm not going anywhere. So he motions to the thugs, and they drag me out. I'm taken downstairs, past a very complacent-looking building guard who waves goodbye to us as I'm pushed into an unmarked van and driven around Shanghai.
So you have gone. So again, just to take stock of this, I mean, you talk to Q, he divulges this information, you go away for a few months, you come back, and basically your life goes to hell. This is a whole succession of bizarre incidents, which is now at this stage in the narrative, Q is effectively abducting you. Really, I mean, yeah. Like. You're okay. We've kind of pressured you, done all this stuff, suggested things. With basically sort of voluntarily consenting to let us lock you up. When that is in play, and now you've effectively been abducted at this stage in the narrative, with still no explanation of what the hell is going on.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
To jump, I mean, I'm going to jump us around a little bit just here in the interest of time. You're in this van. I think following this is a moment where basically they try to put you in a cell for the first time.
First this is a hotel room.
Right. Okay.
I had a tour. I can say this for our listeners. I had a tour of 4 different black jails. an involuntary tour, but I saw and was thrown into, or nearly thrown into, a succession of 4 of them. And this hotel room was the first of them. I called it in my mind, right at that time, in my head, a 4-star black jail.
That's some dark humor. Okay, and
Can't do anything
you
like that.
resist that, but ultimately they are successful in locking you up, and by this point they're openly accusing you. Like the justification is that somehow or another there's some sort of mental illness issue, and that's why they've got to lock you away. Is that
That's
correct?
right. That's right.
So let's jump to there. I mean, you're sort of being dragged. Like I use an Alice in Wonderland analogy here. You're being dragged down this rabbit hole without any explanation, other than as it
Yeah.
evolves, you need a rest. You have some kind of issues, which it seems to me pretty clearly means we got to discredit you because you have information that could really get a lot of people in trouble. And they finally, ultimately do just lock you up. Can you describe, I mean, what is that facility like and what is done to you there?
Well, the facility, like everything else, except a couple of the things that I could talk about in some other segment or people can find out in the book, much of what I saw was very normalized looking places. So this place where I'm, let's say, finally left at, looked like an administrative building. That's the only thing I could think of at the time, but it was a very normal sort of place. People coming in and out, doing their daily business. But meanwhile, I'm dragged off to a corridor by thugs, the same ones or many of the same ones who had dragged me from the apartment, to a side corridor where I'm brutally tortured.
And when you're tortured, how? What was done to you?
Well, I was taken and thrown into a chair behind which there was a cross made out of lattice work of the type you see in a garden, a transverse piece and a vertical piece. And my arms were ripped to each side, tied to that thing, that frame, let's call it, as far out as these people could drag my arms, strapped, to the point of cutting off the blood flow at the wrist at each side to this sort of cross framework. And then one of the thugs opens my mouth, another one just comes up and dumps an entire handful of ashes and dirt into my mouth. And all the while, as I've been dragged to this framework, I've been beaten and kicked because I didn't want to move. They were trying to drag me and finally carried to this damn thing. So there was a lot of beating and kicking, and then this horrific experience of being tied up to this thing.
So at this stage in this narrative, just again, I know maybe I'm beating a dead horse here, but other than people telling you things like you need a rest, I mean, you have not been arrested. You have not been charged. You have not been told this is happening to you because of a crime. Not that that would justify torture, but there isn't any moment here where somebody has clarified you even for what the heck is going on. That this is just that you've just been literally just dragged into this nightmare without a coherent explanation at all, right?
Completely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in fact, as long as he could, Q was pretending that he was helping me. At a certain point, I didn't believe that. So it was also hard to get rid of him. We don't need to go into right here. But at any rate, yeah, that's what they did. And that's where I was for about a good 7 hours, I would say. And, the guards would talk to each other a lot in Shanghainese, which I only understood fragments of, but a lot in Mandarin. And they would keep saying, oh, we've only got a few more hours to live, and that'll be it. Look, he's practically half dead now, comments like that. And I really felt half dead. I didn't actually think I was going to survive this. This is already, 2.5 weeks of almost complete sleeplessness, of being dragged around, myself having to run for my life through Shanghai streets at 2 a.m. Didn't work. That's kind of where I got seized and thrown into this place. That's where in the story that all happened. But I know I didn't think I was going to live. But on the other hand, I just didn't want to die. So I just gradually tried to ground myself in some kind of way, and I just tried to use some breathing exercises. I tried not to pass out because I was afraid of what might happen if that happened. So, there are more steps to the story, but in the end, I wake up with my arms tied to a hospital bed, and a nurse is injecting me with something, or someone in a nurse's uniform, let's say.
So you wake up and literally again the disorientation I think is a huge issue here because there's no information as to what's as to even why this is happening to you other than surmise. And your first thought I think is they're killing me with these injections.
Yeah, absolutely. I see two X's, black X's, marked on this very thin pajama top in which I find myself dressed. And this nurse has put a hypodermic right into one of them, and she's coming back with another one. And I rip my left hand free, and I try to guard my right shoulder with that. And I hear a nurse behind us saying in Chinese, "Okay, give him the shot at 4 a.m. Don't worry about it now." And there ensued a night of the most unspeakable terror I could ever quite imagine.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're effectively buried alive in a facility, and have no control, and people are doing things to you that you don't have any idea really even what they're doing to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me just jump in here. We're ultimately talking about you being in this facility for 10 days. But the point is, I think that folks really need to grasp psychologically that nobody told you that. I mean, first of all, nobody's really explaining to you in any coherent fashion why this is happening. And certainly there are things happening to you that are completely unjustified, no matter what the reason is. But that's 10 days is long enough, but 10 days when you don't have any idea how long you're really going to be held has got to be psychologically just devastating, right?
Yeah, totally. I had no idea, of course, as you said, why this is happening, and to a great extent, what exactly was happening, what was in that injection. I thought it was one of these two-part lethal cocktails they use to execute criminals. I had no idea what that was, and it certainly didn't produce a great reaction. But yeah, you've got it exactly right. I had no idea how long I was going to be there, what was going to happen next. I thought very surely I was going to die in short order.
So we're going to close in here on wrapping up for this segment, and then we're going to pick up again in the second segment from this point on. But just to kind of take stock of where we are and to tease a little bit where we're going in the next segment. I mean, at this point, you have in essence been disappeared into a Chinese mental institution because you're in possession of information that is dangerous to some very powerful people. And you're either going to keep you there, or at a minimum, they're going to so discredit you that nobody will pay any attention to you later. Is that an accurate summation of where we are?
Yeah, I think that's definitely what the intent was by then, if I didn't actually die from the process, because that was really the original intent. That was the easy way to get rid of me. This is all as the plot evolved. But yeah, that's exactly how I discovered it at the time. I discovered it just,
So ultimately you're able to get out, but and I don't want to go into all the details of that now because that's for the next time. But I mean, you have to get yourself out on your own, basically. In other words, the U.S. government doesn't ride to your rescue.
No, it doesn't at all. There's a whole dimension of the U.S. side of this thing that's extremely troubling, and that actually eventually reaches up to Senator Feinstein, because I'll just leave it at this, if it's okay with you, Sam.
Yeah.
We'll get into this. We'll get into this, as you said, in the next segment. But I would like to say that Senator Feinstein blocked all investigation into this personally. She was personally apprised of this situation. She knew every last detail that I have told you today and more. And she personally blocked any investigation into any aspect of this case, which involves some very strange things from the U.S. consulate, potentially. And I would like to say that Senator Feinstein betrayed me the way she continues to betray the American people. Every last one of them is sacrificed by her to her interests and her husband's interests in communist China.
I think, look, that's the perfect note on which to end for today, because I think we will pick up in the next segment with how you got out and, well, exploring what the consulate did or did not do, maybe more accurately, and move on to talking about Senator Feinstein and whose interests exactly it is that that lady is serving on any given day, because I certainly don't think it's the people of the United States of America.
I have definitive proof that it is not.
Warren, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Again, for folks listening, the book is Kafka in China. Available where, Warren? How do we get our hands on it?
Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon Kindle or whatever.
Yep, you could jump on Amazon Kindle, you can download it, and you can be reading it within a couple of minutes. And it's a good read. It is and a really important and terrifying story. So, Warren, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Sam.
And thanks for listening to Ground Truth. We'll talk to you next time when we pick up in the second segment of our interview.